Hey guys, it's the Conic, and in this one, I wanted to make a quick update on my Herald of Agony Herald setup, as not even 24 hours after my original video was up, PGG nerfed the living daylights out of the Damnation node. So, I spent some time after editing my Absolution video trying to figure out how to salvage my elemental defenses without the Damnation node, and without losing too much DPS of course. The result, however, was very shocking, as not only did I end up a lot tankier, I even gained damage in the process. So we're going to be going over all the changes from the pre-nerf version in this video. For those that don't know what the nerf I am talking about is, Damnation used to read, gain an additional elemental damage reduction equal to half of your chaos res, but then it sets your maximum endurance, frenzy, and power charges to 0. But now, it says, for each element you've been hit by damage of recently, 20% reduced damage taken off that element, and then you have 20% of cold, fire, and lightning damage taken recouped as life. So basically, it went from being a free 40-ish elemental damage reduction when you had 80 chaos res to being a conditional 20% damage reduction for an element for 4 seconds after you get hit by said element. An interaction that honestly I have no idea if it would even apply to blocked elemental hits, so it might just be you have to take the damage for it to work. So it just wasn't worth to even bother not going Apocalypse's +3 levels at this point. But this also just meant that we had to figure out a way to increase elemental max hits, which just essentially got gutted by this nerf. If you haven't already, do consider liking and subscribing, as it helps a lot with the algorithm and with hitting our 2025 goal of getting to 2,000 subscribers. A goal that if we hit, I will be revealing my face on stream and on YouTube afterwards. So if that interests you, do consider subscribing. So starting off, let's go over the Ascendancy node changes that we made following the nerfs. Now for Damnation, we obviously dropped it because I don't like the new Damnation, and we went for Apocalypse instead. This helps us to gain damage because we are going to need to cut damage from other parts of our build. We also dropped Future Guilt in favor of Future Nostalgia, as this would also help us gain some of the damage we planned on losing. But this also means that we're losing physical damage reduction. But also, you need to remember that we are also gaining endurance charges which we could not use with Damnation. And we can easily get to 4 max endurance charges, which would be 16% physical damage reduction. So it turns out that we're net even on the physical damage reduction front. So after the Ascendancy changes, we had to figure out how can we raise the max hits. And the biggest 2 changes I made to help in that front are, firstly, I changed my amulet from an Ashes, which would give me a lot of damage, to a Jinx Juju. This allows us to take some of the damage we take and distribute it among our specters. So now we just have a basically flat 10% damage reduction coming from the amulet. But not only that, we switched our Animate Guardian to running a Kingmaker. Now the Kingmaker has Fortification. Now Fortification just says less damage taken. So now with 10 Fortification, we and all our minions are just taking 10% less damage. But if you remember the way our Animate Guardian was set up previously, this would then drop the frenzy charge generation we were getting from our shield, which meant that we had to make some Spectre changes. So we then ended up dropping we dropped the Perfect Forest Warrior, and instead we're opting for a Carnage Chieftain instead. This meant that the frenzy charges that our AG was giving us would then come from our Spectre instead. We do lose Onslaught, but we still gain Calling Strike because our AG's Kingmaker provides Calling Strike to nearby allies. To go along with all the changes we just made, we also have a change in our weapon. Now previously we were using a rare wand, but because the damage multiplier, or the biggest damage multiplier from our weapon was a +2, we are able to use a Dark Seer. And the biggest appeal for this Dark Seer is A, we don't lose much damage because it still has +2. B, it's giving us +2 to max life per level, which is a lot of max life, which increases the life pool we can eat damage with. But not only those, it also has Malediction. Now, how do you apply Malediction? You have a 10% chance to blind on hit, which we hit a lot from our spells. So the enemies will always have Malediction. Now, what does Malediction do? Malediction reduces the amount of damage the enemies do, and it increases the damage they take. So not only was it a defense boost, it also helped our offense in that way as well. We have also opted to change our ring, the Circle of Nostalgia, to the Hungry Loop. The main reason for this is A, it gives us an extra socket, But not only that, it gives us a 5 link to have our Animate Guardian in. Now, our Animate Guardian is going to be in this socket with meat shield, minion life, increase AoE, and empower. The idea here is we're giving him a lot of survivability, so he doesn't die, of course. But not only that, it also frees up a gem socket elsewhere. And by rearranging a couple of things, we're actually able to get a space for Awakened. Where is it? There. We were able to get a space for Awakened melee physical damage on our Raised Spectre. Now, what does Awakened melee physical damage do in this case? It has a chance to intimidate on hit for 4 seconds. Now, if you think about the Spectres we currently have, we have a lot of constantly hitting Spectres from the Warlord who is jumping around, constantly hitting enemies. We hit a lot with our Spectres, and as such, we should have a high uptime on Intimidate, especially single target. So this allows us to gain Intimidate, which is a debuff that makes enemies take increased attack damage, thereby increasing our damage even more. We have also opted to move some things around on the skill tree. So that we could fit in an extra maximum endurance charge for even more PDR and elemental damage reduction. But also, we have switched our Glorious Vanity from being any random vanity to being Zibakwa, which would give us Divine Flesh. By having Divine Flesh, we then convert elemental damage to Chaos, and we increase that Chaos res even more. So now, our Fire max hit gets lower because of it, but our Cold and Lightning go up, and even Chaos goes up because now we have more max Chaos res. And for the main reason we actually dropped the Herald of Purity Ascendancy, it was because, again, I was trying to not lose damage. So we opted in to switching our Ghastly Eye Joe that provided blind on hit, because we no longer need blind on hit, to Calamicious Visions. And this gives us Lone Messenger Keystone. Lone Messenger prevents you from using more than one Herald. This meant we couldn't use Herald of Purity, and as such we had to drop Herald of Purity. But that also gave sockets way for all the other changes I made in the gem section. But this also gives us a very big amount of DPS. Feels very good to have it. And as you see, our max hits, you can barely tell that we lost the Herald of Purity PDR. And keep in mind, with these max hits, this is still with our defensives off. With our Steel Skin on, we actually go up to 60. You can see this is a lot, especially compared to our previous versions. Something else that is important to note about replacing the Circle of Nostalgia is, while we no longer needed a reservation, so we could actually do away with the Circle of Nostalgia, we do lose the bonuses it gave us, like poison chance and whatnot. So we will have to use more tattoos to round out your poison chance. But not only that, you now need a source of flat chaos damage. So I opted in to go for Eldritch Implicit for my chaos damage to spells. I initially wanted to go for a Bone Ring, but as you can see, this says to attack, so you actually cannot use this. So I'll be fixing that before I post the POB. The changes overall mean that we are spending considerably less for this budget and coming out with even more damage and defenses than we had before. And that's just amazing. Let me know in the comments what your first thoughts were when you saw the nerf, because I personally couldn't believe my eyes. The one Ascendancy that already had the no aura gimmick was the one getting nerfed before launch. Alas, it was all for the greater good, as if it hadn't happened, I wouldn't have had to rework the build and get the stuff that I got. If you haven't already, do consider liking and subscribing, as it helps a lot. And with all that said, thank you for watching.